Welcome to the Learning Reinvented Podcast, brought to you by myself, Katie Godden, and the team at The Learning Effect. There are lots of podcasts out there, so we wanted to do something slightly different. This week, we're talking about being great managers. I'm delighted to welcome Belinda Brummer to the podcast. Thank you for joining me. Would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Hi, Katie. My name is Belinda Brummer, and I am in Dublin, Ireland. I am currently a solo entrepreneur, which is really just a euphemism for saying that I'm running my own business all by myself at the moment, but with grand plans and great ambition for that to expand.
That sounds awesome. Can you explain a little bit more about your background and what brought you to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, absolutely. So mine is a little bit of an immigrant story, and that is important because I think immigrant stories are stories of people doing things differently and really putting themselves out there in different ways. So I am originally from South Africa. However, I made my way to Ireland quite unintentionally about 25 years ago. Way back then, in South Africa, I was a primary school teacher, but naively thought that I could teach when I arrived in Ireland, which wasn't the case, because in Ireland in those days, you needed to be able to speak Irish to be a primary school teacher, and I clearly didn't speak Irish. And so I got a job in an educational technology startup company and reskilled myself, certainly on the job and by doing. And I was working in a context that was focused on adult education, which was digital learning all the way back in 25 years ago. And so I was surrounded by this notion of learning virtually, by learning online, and in the world of adult education. But my job, which was HR, was all about supporting and working with people who happened to be managers, who were doing amazing things in the organization. And that particular organization was a really, really great place to work. And people were trying to do their best. And so I had a really different experience of what it meant to be a manager and what it meant to support managers in their quest to do their work in that environment. And the reason why I say it's very different is my origin story then for the business that I'm doing now was fast forward a number of years, and I undertook a master's in management consultancy. And I was sitting in a lecture one day, and it was an organizational development lecturer, and he was talking about management and how employees needed to be protected from management. And I was a mature student surrounded by people who had never been in the workplace, and these other students were just passively taking that in. And yet that statement, when he said that, it really slammed up against my experience at that point, because I knew what the people that I had been working with in that organization were doing, what they were trying to do, how hard it was to do what they were doing, and the efforts that they went to do that, and how I walked that road with them in a HR capacity. And coming out of that, one of the papers that I did in the course of completing my master's was titled something to the effect of "Leadership Can Be Taught Even When there isn't a natural talent for that." Because I genuinely believe that you could take somebody who were not completely incompetent, but who had passion, who had the right attitude, and if you kind of expose them to the right environment with the right supports that were just in time, that were really relevant to what they were doing in that moment, that they could get better and do better in that moment. But then with that repeated support and that constant support, they could go on to really develop that muscle, and be the leader, be the manager. And I will distinguish between the two at some point in this conversation, I'm sure. And so that was the grounding of my belief that if you paid more attention to management and leaders in a positive way, employees did not need to be protected from managers or management. Now, I acknowledge that my experience was in a particular context, and that other people do have very difficult experiences with their managers, as we know, because one of the kind of realities that you see people talking about all the time is that people leave managers, they don't leave jobs or something like that. And so we do know that people do have horrendous experiences of managers. But I also know what can happen when you have a great manager and when that manager really supports you. After completing my master's, which was in management consultancy, I worked in management consultancy for a while. I did a few other interesting things. And then I somehow landed up leading the development of a learning product that focused on sales skills in a particular organization. And for the next 4 or 5 years, I was taken on a learning design journey. And so it was really, really interesting going from being a teacher to being a HR person within an educational technology context to then actually being the person who was kind of leading the design and the development of an educational program for salespeople, which again reflected my experience that if you give people the right supports in the right way at the right time, that they can do better and be better, and you're developing the person along the way, which was really, really important. And coming out of that experience, so coming back, Katie, to what your original question, what led me to be this solo entrepreneur? At the back end of 2022, we had all been through, massive times of change, etc. And everybody was resetting, and I was resetting as well. And just some things came together that gave me a sense of, at this point in my life and in my career, I wanted to do something that reflected all of that experience and brought it together. And this desire to do this emerged through various conversations with friends and family, and just over time. Again, this is the power of conversation in the right moment, in the right time, right? And that's how I came to do this. I won't say that, I had this big business plan that I set out and said, this is exactly what I'm going to do. I iterated. I've kind of moved into the space of what I am doing, but it is about bringing all of that together, both my education background, my HR background, the work that I've been doing with managers and leaders, both in a consultancy perspective and a HR perspective, and then bringing in that learning design aspect as well. And it all comes together in the current kind of guise of being a solo entrepreneur.
It sounds like you've definitely got lots of experience in different topics that have helped contribute to where you are today, especially going kind of from that primary school teacher piece into HR, and then obviously management, but then the instructional design as well. That's obviously enabled you to be able to take those experiences and create something great. So obviously today we're going to talk about managers and what it takes to be a great manager and how you kind of teach that as well to people. What does it mean to you to be a great manager? And then my second part of that question will be, how do you teach that?
So I'm going to be a little bit ordinary here, Katie, and say I'm not going to answer your question. And the reason I'm not going to answer your question is because this is something that I am exploring myself. What does it mean to be a great manager? And how I'm exploring it is I have a podcast of my own called The Manager's Moment, and I have conversations with managers and leaders about what management means to them. And I come to those conversations really open, without a formulated view on what management is. I think we know what it looks like when we see it happening, and we know it, we feel it when we are in the presence or being led by a great manager. And I am trying to understand from the people who are doing that what they think that is. But what I can say is, what I have noticed about what people talk about, what they say management is, and then we can, when they talk about and share their moments of actually being the manager, what greatness can look like, we can extrapolate that. But what I've noticed is that they generally distinguish between the technical aspects of management, and that's to do with process and things like, the tasks and getting the projects done on time, and the processes and the systems that they set up to be able to do that. And they distinguish between that and people management, and the aspects of people management that they tend to talk about, the kind of things rather that they tend to talk about when they start talking about people management, is largely to do with change management. What happens in times of change? How do you move people? How do you support people? How do you motivate people? How do you help them answer the big questions? And it's about the group dynamics. It's about relationships, communication. So those are the things that the people that I'm speaking to seem to put in different parts. They've got this technical approach to management in their understanding, and the people management approach. There's another thing that they distinguish between, and this is the age-old thing of what is a manager and what is a leader, right? And some people on the call, some people in these conversations that I have with them, they it's interchangeable. They, in one sentence, they'll be talking about managers, and in the next they'll be talking about leaders, and they really don't distinguish, what the difference is. They don't distinguish between they don't distinguish between the two. Whereas other people will be very, very clear, and they will say management does this, and those people will tend to talk to the technical aspects when they refer to management. And then leaders do this, and they then tend to talk to strategy and tend to talk to those people aspects. And so what is emerging as an understanding for me, and yet it is emerging, and it will continue to emerge, because management as a profession is evolving. Management today is not what management was 10 years ago, because everything in our work life and our work days are changing. Even the importance of humans in the workplace is changing. And so management is going to evolve. And I'm really excited about going on that journey. And so I don't want to say this is what management is. I think we know what it feels like to be in the presence of a great manager. But to actually say this is what it is, I think that evolves. I think it is very specific to the individual. I think it is very specific to the context in which people are operating. What makes for a good manager in a highly technical environment might be a very different thing and a different experience than a manager who is managing in a little bit more of a service type environment. Not that one is vastly different than the other, but maybe the focus and the need is different in terms of what you want your manager to be able to achieve. So that, Katie, is not answering your question, but saying an awful lot in answer to your question.
No, I completely agree with you. I think it's about perception as well, because like you said, if you're in a different industry, if you've got different people and different personalities, like I know when I've managed people, when I've been managed by people, some people prefer maybe to be micromanaged and they kind of want to be a bit more handheld through processes, through changes, whatever that might be that you're helping them with. But then equally, some people don't want that. So it's being able to adapt and change in accordance to that as well, but still get the outcomes that you're
Yeah,
looking for.
and I think that's really important, and that is that different people want and need different things. I don't think anybody wants to be micromanaged, but I do think that there are some people who are more comfortable with or need, for lots of different reasons, a little bit more direction or presence from their manager than other people do. Some people just want to be left alone to get on with things. And sometimes those can almost be the harder people to manage, because management is about relationship as well. And when somebody just wants to be left alone to get on with it, and you're happy to do that because they are a high performer or they get the job done, whatever that may be, to build a relationship needs you to be in the presence of somebody, whether that's virtually or in person. But it means that you are communing. And if you're trying to strike the balance between what that person who just wants to get on with things needs and wants versus what it takes to develop a relationship, I think sometimes that can be harder. And that's when you see your high performers getting frustrated in jobs and leaving because they are not getting from that environment what they want. The micromanagement, that is a different thing entirely. What it feels like to be micromanaged, I think, is about not feeling trusted, and what that means, and maybe not even being respected. But I think that there is space for people who maybe are lacking in confidence and who are lacking in capability or competence and feel the need for closer management. And then what the manager does there is different. For them, it is about not necessarily showing up in the "this is how you do it" way, but that's when the manager and their capability and their competence steps in to be able to coach for competence, increase confidence for the person's confidence in what they're doing. And that requires that manager to show up in a very, very different way than for the high performer or even your average performer. And so, and sorry, that sounds like I'm saying somebody who needs that closer management is a poor performer, and that's not the case. I just think that there are people who, in order to feel like they can do their best work, feel like they maybe need a little bit more of a connection with their manager. And that can be whether it's a high performer or an average performer. It can be either. But it's about what the person needs and why they need that, and how the manager then shows up in that situation is different. And so the manager constantly has to be scanning, constantly have to be aware of the different needs of the people. And that requires them to be very present in people's workday and in the way that they do things without micromanaging, I should say.
Yeah, that was probably poor terminology from me, but yeah, definitely people kind of that want that kind of presence from the manager there a bit more. Can you tell us a little bit more about your business, Boost Learning?
Absolutely. So in Boost Learning, I like to say we do management development differently. And what I mean by that is we run, and I use the word we because actually I do have lots of people around me that I draw on for in lots of different ways. But obviously I've said I'm a solo entrepreneur, so there's a lot of me in the we, right? But there are big plans. So if I do use we, it's just because there are other people that I am kind of involve in different ways. However, in Boost Learning, we very much are put managers at the heart of the employee experience, and we run 8-week programs that focus on certain management capability areas. And it's about kind of helping the manager develop competence in that particular area. It's about helping them or giving them space to develop their confidence in that particular area, and how they apply that particular capability or that competence in the context in which they find themselves operating in that moment. And so Boost Learning, the reason why we say we do it differently is there are a lot of training programs you can go on. In fact, the world is awash with different manager training programs, lots of content out there that managers can consume, a lot of experts who will tell you how to manage, lots of templates, etc. But what I have noticed throughout my entire career is that despite all of that content, despite all of that training being available, managers continue to have a tough time, and people continue to have a tough time with their managers. And in Boost Learning, what we do is we take a very individual approach to to developing the person who is the manager. And so these 8-week programs are on a one-to-one basis. There is a learning path and an online environment that people kind of engage in over the 8 weeks. Now, it could take them longer, but it's generally an 8-week guided program. And the program will take them through the learning path that has them really reflecting on how they show up in that capability, in that moment, in that way, how they show up, how they mean to show up, and what is the gap, and therefore what could they be doing differently. And so there is an online element of the experience, and then there is also moments of coaching within the program, which helps actually talk it out, and that's why this is a one-to-one program rather than a one-to-many program, because it is about saying, how do I as a person show up in this moment? And for me to really grapple with that, I need to be able to have an intense kind of perspective taking moment on that and how I actually show up in that. And so in short, if I can just summarize that, Boost Learning provides 8-week programs that focus on management capability and how the manager shows up in their context in that moment.
That sounds really useful, especially for people that are perhaps new to management or perhaps struggling with something that they're doing at the moment as well.
Yeah, and actually,
focus.
Yeah, and Katie, it's not just the new manager. So the new manager, I absolutely think that those training programs are fantastic for the new manager. But equally, I have supported new managers who, through the programs, new managers who actually need to reassess what it is that they think they are going to be and do as the manager, because they will have an experience of being managed. They will have seen management in action. And so what does that mean? What do they make of it? What kind of a manager do they actually want to be? What will help them be congruent? And what I mean by that is they will have certain beliefs, they will have certain values, and yet their job or their environment will ask them to show up in a certain way. And how do they show up in the way that they want to show up, and that is important to them in that particular context, and that they are congruent. Because when they're not congruent, we get inauthenticity. That's when we get the manager who actually is just the mouthpiece for something or somebody else that isn't actually showing up as they, in a way that is important to them. And so that's really important, is figuring that out before you fall into bad habits around what it means to be a manager to you. But equally, it's really, really evident that managers or people who've been doing management 5, 10, even 20 years later, after they first became a manager, have those moments of saying, gosh, what does management mean to me now? Who am I in this moment of my life now? With all of that experience, how do I make sense of all of that in this role, in this time, in this moment, with all the changes that have gone on around me? How do I now want to show up here? And what does that need of me and mean to me? And so it's the new manager, it's the somewhat experienced manager, and it's even that very advanced senior leader who can benefit from these kind of conversations, because we meet the person where they are. It doesn't presume, the programs in Boost Learning do not presume any base knowledge or base experience. As long as you are managing or are about to manage, this is applicable to you.
Yeah, definitely. I can definitely see the benefit for like you said, for all of those types of people, new kind of been in that for a few years, but then obviously the more experienced people as well. I can see the benefits, and I think it's people being willing to actually take responsibility for their own development as well. Going to talk about development, what do you think the difference is between capability development and then leadership development?
So capability. So when we think about capability, root word, are you capable, right? Are you capable in a management context to manage the work, to direct team performance? Are you capable of having good quality relationships with people? And so when we look at what that presents itself as, we see the common management areas of capability. We look at delegation and accountability and coaching and managing for culture and correcting performance and empowering people and embracing and really leveraging diversity and creating an environment that allows all of that to work really, really well. So that's capability. And you develop for that, right? So that is very situational. It is about what is required of you in that moment. How does it show up in your context, and what is needed in your role? So that is capability. The leadership development part is, how does the person show up in that? So when I am delegating, how do I behave? How does my character and my mindset and my beliefs about people and who they are show up in this moment? And how does it manifest? What are people's experience of me as I go about doing whatever it is that I'm doing, whether it's strategizing or managing a project, whatever that may be. And I am distinguishing here between a leader role and leadership. There are lots of people who carry the title of leader who may not necessarily demonstrate great leadership, because leadership is about how well you show up in that moment, whatever that moment is. And so when you're developing, so this is the second part of that term, whether it's capability development or leadership development. The development aspect is about how do you understand what it is that is required of you? What is your awareness of how well you do in that area, or how you show up? And then how do you get better? And that you get better at whatever that is, whether it's capability or leadership. And so the difference between capability development and leadership development probably becomes a little bit more academic, because capability, well, there are tools and techniques you can use to be competent at something. And so in the context of Boost Learning, as we develop for capability, we are tool or technique agnostic, but we use different tools and techniques to help people experiment, to help them use something that enables them to develop insights about how they are showing up or how they could be doing something better. And so the capability development really does rely a little bit more on the creation of tools and techniques to enable people to do those things, and the awareness of those, right? And then leadership development is about the process of raising their self-awareness, the process of reflection, of looking and understanding for feedback. So looking for and understanding feedback, and understanding how that feedback can change them, and what they do with that. And so when you're looking at leadership development, it is about creating the kind of person and the habit within somebody to reflect, to learn, to unlearn, to look for data, to look for feedback, and to make sense of all of that. And so in the context of Boost Learning, we bring those very much together. Yes, we call it management development and it's management capability, because for me personally, I don't think that you cannot be that great manager if all you're doing is being capable and not showing up as a leader. And heavens alive, I do not want to be managed by anybody who is a great leader but cannot show up in the capability areas, and just is incompetent in that area. Has great vision, great, can motivate people and all of that really good stuff, but is actually incompetent. And so you need both of those to come together. And so in Boost Learning, we bring both capability development, the hardcore stuff, together with that leadership development. But we don't necessarily call it leadership development. It's about you, the person, and how you're showing up in that moment and what is needed of you.
I think that's a really good explanation. And obviously having that combination of both the capability and the leadership piece is, like you said, really paramount to being a good manager, because I've been managed in the past and seen people that, like you said, are really good at kind of being there for people, but then kind of the admin tasks of it and not so good, and not knowing those bits as well. And that's kind of where it gets let down, and you can kind of feel that as an employee as well.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you use the word that you can feel that as an employee, because it's really hard to put your finger on it and to articulate that experience. But the things that people might say is, oh, that person's just full of ideas, but they have no idea what it takes to actually implement this, right? So you've got your real blue sky thinkers who are out there coming up with amazing ideas, but actually are not able to help people actualize those ideas, or do something with it, because they don't have an understanding of what it takes to do that thing. And I'm not saying that managers and leaders have to actually be able to do the doing, and that they have to be an expert in that. However, they need to be able to be capable in certain areas. And I think we've all seen and probably admired those really kind of larger than life leaders who paint a vision, but then leave the managers to get on with it. And that's okay as well, because there is a level of self-awareness saying, I can paint this vision, but I need to put in place the right mechanisms to get it done, right? So that's the ideal, I should imagine, for those people. But yeah, what it feels like to work for somebody who has, either no competence, and therefore you are having to make up for the gaps in your own manager, or being subjected to some pretty shoddy work or requirements, or being, you not being seen as a person by your manager. And then the flip side of that is, what is it like to be managed, to be led by somebody who has no idea how to actually help you do what it is that they're doing or want you to do. It's a challenge.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think, like you said, you don't need to be an expert necessarily in the topic, but having that level of understanding of what it takes to complete a task or do something is really essential, I think, for being that manager, because you have more of an understanding then. So when you are coming up with these great ideas, great solutions, whatever it might be, without that level of understanding for your employees and what they need to do to even get a project up and running, they're still going to have BAU work as that they need to complete, but then run projects in parallel with that. You need to have that understanding so you can commit time, etc., to that, the right capabilities. And I think that's something that sometimes is lacking in people, and it's just having that awareness. But you don't want that to the extreme where people know the job inside out. I think it's finding that balance, because then they kind of tend to take over and do everything. So it's finding the right
and then you go
balance
into the
between
land
that.
of, yeah, exactly, because then you go into the land of micromanagement, right? It's
Yeah.
when the manager knows too much of the doing, and so you don't want that. And then I've known managers who have absolutely zero idea about what the people are doing, but they are so expert in being a manager or a leader that you hardly notice the difference. That they don't have that.
So we've had a really great conversation, and we've kind of got to the bottom of what great managers look like, how you can develop them, the differences between capability and leadership development. What does your future look like for yourself personally and for your business going forward?
So personally, I am loving this solo entrepreneur experience. I have myself learned an incredible amount, and my history speaks to being that multi-potentialite, that person who gets really passionate about something intensely for ages, and just loves to be uncomfortable and to be learning. So I will continue on that journey, because believe you me, this solo entrepreneur journey is that. It's learning all the way. So I continue my own learning journey, which is amazing. From a business perspective, I absolutely continue to do the Manager's Moment podcast, because I think bringing those voices to a wider audience, those perspectives, because we don't really want to hear the manager's experience, because managers do things to us, don't they? We don't really want to see them as people. And I am loving, in the context of the conversations that I'm having with these managers, actually looking at the person. So certainly follow the Manager's Moment, look out for more there. From a business perspective, I'm really excited to be working on additional programs, although I would say that the core program, being the manager, is the one that more and more people embrace and then go on to do other programs. I haven't yet built out, and therefore they're not all available in terms of the broad range of capability areas. So look out for more programs coming from Boost Learning, and just seeing where that takes us, and making sure that not, at the moment, a lot of the business is, just where that takes us.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today, Belinda. It's been great to talk and understand a little bit more about your business. But if people want to follow your journey and connect more with you, how do they go about doing so?
Well, first thing is find me on LinkedIn. I am the only Belinda Brummer on LinkedIn, so you can absolutely find me, no problem. That is where I really connect and communicate, so that's the best place to find me. And then follow the Manager's Moment wherever you get your podcasts, indeed where you get this podcast.
Perfect. Thank you so much, and we'll put those links in the show notes below for you.
Fantastic. Katie, thank you so much, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to have this chat with you.
You're more than welcome. Thank you again. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Learning Reinvented podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. If you've not already done so, please follow our podcast. And if the Learning Effect can help you and your organisation, please do get in touch. You can find both James and Katie on LinkedIn, and our contact details are in the show notes below.